So you'll notice in these first few problems, our lead coefficient is a 1. So when we have a lead coefficient of 1, it makes our factoring a little bit easier. We are simply looking for two numbers that multiply to our -10 and add up to a +3. So again, two numbers that multiply to our last term and add up to our middle term. So in this case, that's a +5 and a -2. So either x plus 5 equals 0 or x minus 2 equals 0. X is a -5 or x is a +2. All right, good review. Same thing in number 2. I notice my lead coefficient is 1. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to -24 but add up to +2x. So in this case, that's a +6 and a -4. All right, I notice when I'm looking at number 3, if I'm solving a quadratic, I need a 0 on one side to do the zero product property. So I need to move that 18 over. Now, lead coefficient is still 1. So I'm looking for two numbers that give me a product of 18, but a sum of -9. So that's a -6 and a -3. So x is a +6, x is a +3. Again, number 4, lead coefficient is 1. So I'm looking for two numbers whose product is 35 and sum is 12. That would be a +7 and a +5. And there are two x values. Okay. Now, let's take a look at what happens now that my lead coefficient is not 1. So I'm going to practice solving using the AC method. Some of you might like to guess and check, but I like having steps. So in the AC method, I'm going to follow my steps. First thing I'm going to do is multiply first and last coefficient. Oops. So in this case, I have 8 times 3, which is a +24. Now I'm looking for, this should feel similar, two numbers whose product is 24, but whose sum is -10. So two numbers whose product is our answer, that says answer from step 1, and the sum is our middle term. So in this case, that would be a -6 and a -4. Next, we're going to rewrite the problem with 4 terms. So I'm going to start off with my 8x squared, but now instead of writing -10x, I'm going to write -6x minus 4x plus 3 is equal to 0. Because mathematically, a -6 and a -4 mathematically are the same thing as a -10. Now we can factor by grouping. Once we have 4 terms, we are going to factor by grouping. So again, a refresh for that, we group our first 2 terms and our last 2 terms, and we look for what common factors can I pull out of these 2 terms. What does an 8x squared and a 6x have in common? Well, they have in common a 2 and an x. That leaves us behind with a 4x minus 3. Now, when you factor by grouping, whatever you pull out, you're undistributing, I want to have the same thing left in these parentheses when I'm done. So a -4x plus 3, I don't want to say they have a 1 in common. I want to factor out a -1 so that I can have a +4x minus 3 left in my parentheses. So now if you look at this, it's like we distributed a 2x and we distributed a -1. So if we undistribute that, that is 2x minus 1 times 4x minus 3 equals 0. And then we continue like normal and solve. So x is 1/2 or x is 3/4. All right, let's do it again. So again, I know this has extra steps because that lead coefficient is not -1. So the steps we wrote down, AC method, we multiply our coefficients from the first term and the last term. That's a positive 36. I need two numbers that multiply together to give me a positive 36, but add up to our middle term of 20. So in this case, that's a positive 18 and a positive 2. Step 3 says we rewrite the problem. So instead of writing 20x, we're going to write 18x plus 2x plus 3. The reason we create 4 terms is now we can factor by grouping. What can I pull out of a 12x squared and an 18x? Numerically, they have a 6 in common and an x. And then we're left with 2x plus 3. Oh, look, I wanted 2x plus 3 in my parentheses, so I'm just going to pull out a 1. Undistribute the 6x plus 1. So we have 6x plus 1 is equal to 0, or 2x plus 3 is equal to 0. So our x values are 1/6 or -3/2. Sorry, -1/6. All right, let's try again. And again, the reason I'm doing the AC method is because this lead coefficient is not 1. So I'm going to multiply first times last. I get -120. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply up to -120, but add to -19. So this one might take you a few minutes. Two numbers that multiply to -120, but add up to -19. So if you don't see it right away, you can just list your factors of 120. You can start with the 60 and the 20 if you need to. That's fine. And keep working from there until you come up with a product. I know my product is going to be -24 and 5. That's okay if that took you a little bit of guess and check there to get that, or you listed more of your factors. So I'm going to rewrite this as 4x squared minus 24x plus 5x minus 30 equals 0. And we do this so we can group our first two and our second two. 4x squared and 24x, I can pull out a 4x. We're left with x minus 6. A 5x and a 30, we can pull out a 5. We're left with x minus 6. So let's undistribute that 4x and the 5. So either 4x plus 5 is equal to 0, or x minus 6 is equal to 0. So we have an x value of -4/5, or we have an x value of positive 6. Again, same 4 steps every time. Lead coefficient is not 1. Multiply first term times last term. That's the A and the C, right? That's why we call it AC method. We get a -12. Two numbers that multiply to -12, but add up to positive 11. That's a positive 12 and a -1. Then we're going to rewrite the problem with 4 terms. We do that so we can factor by grouping. So I pull out my common factor here, which in this case is 3x. I'm left with x plus 4. And again, we want what's in these parentheses to match up. So I'm going to pull out a -1 so that I can be left with x plus 4. Undistribute. So 3x minus 1 equals 0. X plus 4 equals 0. So x is a positive 1/3. X is a -4. So we are going to need to be able to factor as we go through this, intersection of lines and circles.